Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Thatcher Report. If you're not listening in the morning, I hope you're having a great day or night. This is Zachary Thatcher. This is a occasional podcast based on essays I do on Substack, zacharythatcher.substack.com. So I did a new essay yesterday, so I want to do the podcast version of it. It's really two quick observations, which I will expound on a little bit here, and an invitation to an event that I'm hosting under the aegis of Thatcher Report. Let me start with that. I am hosting a small get-together at my home in Brooklyn with the thinker Adam Lewis Klein, who is, now I always say young man, because now I'm in my 50s. Everybody kind of feels like a younger person compared to me, especially in Brooklyn. But in any event, Adam is an academic at McGill. He was at a prior institution, left because of anti-Semitism, now is getting a PhD in McGill, an anthropologist. I encountered him at the CUNY Graduate Center, which is the public state university iteration in New York City. Basically, I went to a talk at a school with this guy, and he's very, very well-spoken, very interesting. He's academic, but I found him accessible and thoughtful. And what I like about his personality is he has a real sense of equanimity when discussing really tough topics. I get kind of hot under the collar and a little crazy and emotional. He is really quite chill when talking about really, really hard things. I mean, he himself has just faced so many problems as a Jewish academic, but yet he has a savoir-faire to him that I just think is great, and I admire it. So I'm so grateful that he accepted my invitation to give a little talk. What does he talk about? His focus is on studying anti-Zionism, which he writes as one word. ANTI, Zionism, as one word smashed together. That's on purpose. He's trying to say that there have been different evolutions of people criticizing or disagreeing with the idea in the 19th century and then into the 20th century that Jews should create a nation state in their indigenous homeland of Israel. And that was debated. That was a movement within Judaism. It started in Russia in the 19th century with some Jews who were just so sick and tired of having their butts kicked by Cossacks and the Russian imperial government. And many Jews didn't agree with the idea that we should go back to Israel, which at the time was a backwater of the Ottoman Empire, full of swamps, not an easy place to be, and not really an issue with the locals as much as, which emerged later, but just a huge physical challenge when the option was to go to America or to Argentina or to Canada or other places in the Western Hemisphere. And it was a debate. So there was an anti-Zionism debate, mostly among Jewish people. And that debate was basically settled in 1948 when Israel became a state. And Jews were already in ancient Israel continuously since antiquity, and in the surrounding countries like Egypt and what became Jordan and so on. But then obviously a lot of Jews started coming from the Russian Empire and other places in Eastern Europe, starting, I believe, in the 1840s. And then that just kind of continued until 1948. And obviously the Holocaust and the mass statelessness. There were many, many, many Jews. I don't know the number, but hundreds of thousands, if not more, Jews that were in Europe, and they didn't have anywhere to go. They survived the Holocaust, but they couldn't go back to wherever they came from. It wasn't safe, certainly, and many non-Jewish people in Poland and Germany and so on had taken their homes, taken all of their businesses, and they didn't know where to go. Not all of them wanted to go to America. Some of them wanted to go to what was then Palestine. In any event, the United States government, the UN, helped validate this idea of Zionism by agreeing that Israel should become a new nation state. Lots of other states were being formed around this time. India got rid of the British Empire. Later, Pakistan would break off. This was a time after World War II when things were changing globally, and Israel is just part of that. In any event, Adam Lewis Klein is talking about a more contemporary pathology that started in the far left, which is anti-Zionist as a hate movement. And the idea is, why is one country on earth the focus of far left social justice activism? You don't hear them talking much about Iran, which just killed maybe tens of thousands of people. You don't hear them talking much about China, which has concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims in the western precincts of their empire. It's just weird that they only focus on Israel. Israel has problems, like all countries have problems. Some are worse than others. Israel certainly has problems and challenges. The occupation in the West Bank and Gaza are deeply problematic. And that's a super long discussion about how Israel wound up controlling these territories. It was because of defensive wars. But in any event, doesn't mean that Israel should cease to exist. But oddly, people like Zoran Mamdani, an otherwise intelligent person, base his entire political identity, and I suspect his personal moral identity, on destroying Jewish indigeneity in Israel, which is puzzling. But if you think about it as a hate movement, it makes a lot more sense, like segregation and apartheid and other movements, homophobia. We've seen different hate movements. I've seen different hate movements in my lifetime. And now anti-Zionism is the new one. Is it classic anti-Semitism, like what Nick Fuentes or the Nazis or others preach? No, it's a different type of anti-Judaism. Anti-Semitism comes from kind of a racial way of thinking about people, which is debatable that there are even such a things as race. But we're more familiar from the 20th century with anti-Semitism as a racial thing. Just Jews are just bad inherently. It's like in their DNA or something. This anti-Zionism is a little bit different form of hatred, but it's still, guess what, focused on the Jews. Okay, so if you're interested in learning more from a far more sagacious and intellectual person than I am, please contact me. And if we have room, you can listen to the great Adam Lewis Klein speak in early February, coming up in a couple weeks. So let's go back to the two quick hits from yesterday's essay. These are kind of things I've been thinking about as 2026 evolves. One of them is about what's happening in Minnesota. And it's super troubling. I can't even imagine what it's like to be in Minneapolis right now. I mean, the scenes that we're seeing from the streets, it's kind of like urban combat, and it's horrible. People are getting killed, number one. That's just awful. And you're seeing, but why are they getting killed? And I'm not defending a immigration officer's decision to pull the trigger on on essentially unarmed civilians or civilians who aren't, I don't know. See, you already get stuck even discussing what's happening. It's terrible that Americans are being killed in the streets of Minneapolis. Bottom line, it's just awful for anybody, American or if you're an illegal immigrant. It's terrible. I deplore violence, and I think it's crazy that it's happening. What I'm going to note is that, who are these anti-ICE protesters? Are they elected? Is this an example of supporting democracy, or is this something else? You have protesters impeding federal agents. Now, I've had I don't think she's going to listen to this, but I've gotten some immediate critical feedback from my mom, and I'm sure from other loved ones are thinking this when they read my stuff now, because I come from a very deep blue Democratic Party, kind of classic 20th century liberalism, liberal background. the social justice kind of orientation that I grew up in was from the 1960s. It was about these kind of peaceful anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. These were not the weathermen that I grew up with. I grew up with nonviolent civil disobedience was considered the gold standard. That's not what's happening in Minneapolis. You have anti-ICE protesters, one of them who thought it was really smart to bring a gun to his protests. They're getting in the way of ICE, and they're using cars, they're using whistles, they're using social media, encrypted messaging, and they're using their physical bodies. That is not legal or smart. It's one thing to protest. I support protests. I support First Amendment rights, obviously. I'm enjoying them right now by recording this podcast. But if you are going to physically get in the way of a federal agent, then I think you're going into a different dimension from peaceful demonstration into taking the law into your own hands. And what is that? That's acting like a militia, right? The far left or the left, the classic left, is so anxious about right-wing armed militias. And they should be anxious. I don't think we should have militias in this country. That's crazy. The state has a monopoly of violence. That's it. That's how it has to work to be in civilization. And if we don't like the state, we use elections to change it. That's the whole point of democracy. We hear the left hopping up and down about democracy and the rule of law, but hey, funnily enough, when it's not in their interest, they just force their will on others, and they're literally fomenting violence. This doesn't excuse an ICE officer from pulling the trigger. The men, they shouldn't be doing that. They should have other they should just leave, obviously, than killing somebody. Killing somebody is so bad that I would rather them just walk away and chase after illegal immigrants another day. This is an observation that police departments have done with high-speed chases. Why do a high-speed chase of somebody when you can record their license plate or track their movements with a helicopter or something, and then not do the chase, which is dangerous, and then try to pick them up the next day, track them down another way? Easy for me to say. I'm not in law enforcement. I'm sure things get heated and it's really tough. But in any event, you get where I'm coming from. This is left-wing militias. They're organized and they're defying the rule of law. And I think that they're illiberal and anti-democratic. Elections have consequences. Trump ran on an immigration enforcement platform. Kamala Harris didn't. Trump won the election. It's no surprise that he's going after illegal immigrants. How he's doing it is obviously problematic, and we'll talk about how that's changing in a moment. But this is the consequence of the election. For these activists in Minnesota, and I'm sure they're in California, you see some of the anti-ICE posters in my neighborhood, which I live in a super, super, super far left neighborhood for white people. Black people seem to have very different politics, and it does seem to follow these color lines pretty closely. But in any event, these people, if they want to change immigration policy, they should win an election. That's how it's supposed to be done. And I said in prior essays, all of the cries of no kings, or Trump is a fascist, or this latest one, Trump is a Nazi, ICE are Nazis, children in Minneapolis are Anne Frank, that is all projection of what the left is doing itself is anti-democratic. Yeah, of course, there's a state government versus a federal government. They're different. People in Minnesota are obviously voting for far left-wing people like Ilhan Omar and Tim Walz. But nevertheless, we do have a federal system. There was a federal election. Trump won fair and square. I think he would have won in 2020 as well if we knew that if the Democratic Party and their mainstream media enablers told the truth about Biden. But nevertheless, Trump held on. It's crazy historical event, ran again, and he won. So that's it. Now, that doesn't mean people shouldn't peacefully protest ICE. I would happily join a protest. I don't want to have masked men in military uniforms in civilian settings because a nonviolent person from a different country overstayed their visa. I don't think that's the right way to do it. And sure, you enjoy your First Amendment rights to complain about it and to write your politicians or to have a peaceful protest in a legal way. That's great. That's what makes this country so vital and important. But what we're seeing with the anti-ICE protests isn't that. I'm sure, like the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish protests on college campuses in 2024, I'm sure there's funding from somewhere. I don't know where, but how did those kids got all these tents so quickly? How are all these anti-ICE protesters so well coordinated, taking over church or invading churches, invading hotels? There's obviously things going on behind the scenes. And that's not how democracy is supposed to function. We're supposed to have a rule of law, and we're supposed to have the state have the monopoly of violence. So I think that what's interesting to observe is, speaking of democracy functioning correctly, Trump is the most attuned politician, presidential politician in my lifetime to public sentiment. I don't know what it was like with JFK or anything like that. And I don't really remember, Jimmy Carter or even Ronald Reagan quite as well. Maybe Reagan was attuned too. But Trump is really attuned. They say even Melania Trump is very well attuned, and she watches a ton of TV and has a lot to say about it as well, which is kind of fascinating. And his family members obviously are not all sitting on a beach somewhere enjoying their money. They're running businesses and involved in, some of them are involved in public policy. So Trump is now pivoting. He sees how bad this is. And Kristi Noem, the head of Homeland Security, seems to have gotten way, way, way over her skis, and it seems kind of unhinged to me. Trump is responding to this because it doesn't play well. And that's what a politician should do in a democracy. They should be sensitive to the sentiment of the population and try to be on their good side. And that's great. And that's democracy in action. What's interesting for me to see is, so God willing, things are going to change and de-escalate immediately in Minneapolis, and this won't be repeated in other municipalities across the country. That's good. That's a positive out of a really horrible situation where you have dead Americans in the street. Not good. What's interesting is that the Democrats themselves aren't shifting. They're just kind of doubling down. This is a resistance. This is fascism. They are the noble Star Wars rebel alliance fighting the evil empire. They're not changing at all. They're not de-escalating themselves. They're escalating. And it's sort of like a collision course. And I think it's dangerous for Americans. It's illiberal. It doesn't respect the rule of law. And I don't think it bodes well for the Democratic Party. Now, it's obviously working for them. The Democrats, as the resistance, have scored a lot of political victories lately. And we're, towards the end of this year, when it gets cold again, we're going to be having midterm elections. So maybe electorally, this is a good strategy. It's really dramatic. I don't know that I would call it making good television to have people killed in the streets, but it's creating a dramatic narrative, right? Where you have these very brave resistors who are morally superior, and they're actually looking out for you. They're just telling you what to do. Which is not how democracy is supposed to function, but that's okay. They're better than you. They know better, so they're gonna take charge. That resonates for some voters. I find it terrifying, but that's kind of working. I live in New York City. Zohran Mamdani is social justice warrior number one. He barely squeaked by an election, but he won. So that seems to work. Kind of scary. All I can say is that people accuse me of being pro-MAGA or whatever. I'm just trying to have a less biased analysis. I'm seeing Trump change. I'm not seeing the Democrats change after these horrible killings. And I'm thankful for the change. And I wish the Democrats were a better opposition party who could also change. I'm not really holding out hope for them, but it would be nice if that would happen. Okay, so the second observation, which is a little bit tied in, is that earlier this week, Israel won the Gaza war, but Hamas defeated the Democratic Party. Okay, sounds incendiary, sounds crazy. Let me explain what I mean. Obviously, Israel won a military engagement, and Hamas has been ascendant ideologically as an influencer of the Democrats, as the noble resistors. Here, what's another example of a noble resistor? Oh, a guy in a keffiyeh killing children in Israel. That's a real heroic figure for the left, and not a lot of introspection. When you think about what's happening in Iran, that just proves the point. You have the Iranian government killing possibly tens of thousands of people, as I was just mentioning, and the left has nothing to say about that because in a sense they support it, which is crazy, and I don't think they really want to be in that position, but that's the corner they've painted themselves in. All right, so let's go back. So Israel won the war in Gaza. It's obvious. What I mean by that, the symbolic point is that earlier this week, the last body of an Israeli was returned to Gaza, from Gaza to Israel. He was a 24-year-old police officer killed, I believe, on the day of October 7th, 2023. And Israel has a very strong sense of solidarity with themselves, and they want every single person back. Part of it is related to Jewish law for burial. Part of it is just obvious. It's a really small country. People know each other. Almost every single person, except for the ultra-religious, serves in the military. So it's an organization. It's intimate in Israel. They want everybody back, and they got him. So that's great. There are some debates about how it happened. Was Hamas helpful? Was Hamas not helpful? For the purposes of this podcast, let's just say he's back. Now, that marks a real end of the phase of the war. Israel is victorious. They were invaded. Over 1,000 people were brutally massacred. Many of the murders filmed on GoPro cameras by young Palestinian men. Like here I go again, calling everybody young, but by Palestinian men invaded Israel. They filmed it. They didn't hide it. And the IDF took a long time to respond. That was almost as big of a shock as the invasion itself, that Israel wasn't prepared. And now, 20 odd months later, 27 months later, now what's happening? Israel controls the majority of Gaza. The IDF controls the majority of Gaza. And Hamas gets the other 47%. But there are militias, anti-Hamas militias, Palestinian militias that predate Hamas that are active in those areas. So it's not ironclad control, but it's still terrible. And of course, the entire map of the Middle East has, to say it's been totally withdrawn is an overstatement, but it's changed dramatically. It's really, really dramatic. And of course, the mainstream media, the mainstream left and the far left have vilified the popularly elected leader of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm just going to note that he was the prime minister on October 7th, 2023. He gets the blame for the lack of preparedness and not being more assertive, taking the initiative, being proactive before on October 6th. That would have been nice. But he also retained his prime ministership, and he was tenacious and adaptive. He changed the military leadership about a year in, and now look at the state of affairs in the Middle East. Pretty different. Definitely much better conditions for Israel and for millions and millions and millions of Arabs in Syria and in Lebanon. And look what's happening in Iran, where there is a nascent civil war or insurgency. I'm not sure what's going to happen over there, but none of what's happening in Tehran would be happening if it wasn't for decisions made in Jerusalem. Kind of shocking, right? Israel is a country of 10 million people. Iran is a country of 90 million people. Then add Lebanon, then add Syria, and so on and so forth. And little Israel has held on and changed things. Obviously, with the support shifting and contingent support from America. So that's a huge part of it. It's not only Netanyahu, but it's a little bit of a complicated dance sometimes with the USA. Much less complicated with the Trump administration, which is emphatically pro-Western. They don't have to kind of talk about maintaining horrible status quos of dictatorships. They don't like dictatorships, clearly. And it's just Israel won. It's amazing. Now, how long is that going to go on for? I don't know. It's a very tough region. So, meanwhile, in Brooklyn, now that Zoran Mamdani won the mayoralty and is currently serving as our mayor, which started January 1st, you're seeing the keffiyehs are back. They kind of took a hiatus, especially after Israel had the ceasefire, the Trump brokered ceasefire last year. There weren't as many keffiyehs. Now, obviously, it's colder, but I don't think that's the reason. I think Mamdani's win has electrified the far left, and he's incredibly charismatic. He seems like a really friendly guy. He gets his new buddies with Donald Trump. It's kind of an amazing. He's an amazing political actor to follow, and the keffiyehs are back, and it just seems like the argument that Hamas advances violently, which is no Jewish indigeneity in Israel. That's it. That's their whole policy. Jews, kill the Jews so you do not have Jewish indigeneity. No Jewish sovereignty is allowed. Kill them all, kill them anywhere in the world. That's how it is for Hamas. Hamas is not its own thing, right? People talk about, the war against Hamas. Hamas is comprised of Palestinian people. It's related to ideological movement of Muslim Brotherhood. It is which is part and parcel of ISIS and Al Qaeda and Al Shabaab and Boko Haram and Hezbollah and the IRGC. Now, there's Shia stuff and there's disagreements within these terror groups, but you get it. This is violent Islamism, and they won the debate for the Democratic Party. It's just normal for standard Democrats, certainly for young people who don't necessarily have the historical context and have been ideologically brainwashed by our public school system and 20 years of anti-colonial academia and activist mainstream press. They're just axiomatically anti-Israel. Israel's bad. Israel, when I grew up, South Africa was the bad guy because of apartheid. I think that was justified, although I'm going to note now that post-apartheid South Africa seems like in really rough shape and not a very good or safe place for its citizens. But nevertheless, apartheid was bad. And now that's just Israel. That's just been cemented on the left. It's really beyond debate and beyond discussion. And to me, that's the win of Hamas. And you can see it on the streets of New York. I think you see it in California, and it's deeply, deeply troubling. One proof point of this, which I find just so frustrating, and I'm never going to win this argument. I've just totally lost. I've lost when it comes to supporting Jewish sovereignty in the Middle East for the Democratic Party, obviously. But, there is still a debate within the Democratic Party. There are still a few centrists left. And Rahm Emanuel, maybe Fetterman, there's Josh Shapiro, a lot of them are Jewish. There is a couple of centrists left, or people who say they're centrist, and then they tack very far to the left when they get political power, like in Virginia. We'll see what happens in New Jersey. But by and large, the new Democrats, the energy in the Democratic Party is progressive. It's DSA, it's Mamdani, AOC, Ilhan Omar, et cetera, et cetera. They are Sorry, but to go back to the centrists for a second before I go down the rabbit hole of the progressives, even as the centrists, it's just become normal now to compare Trump to Hitler. That's just a normal thing, especially after the shootings in Minnesota. And this is how my second point of Hamas being an influencer for the Democratic Party is related to my first point about who appointed the anti-ICE demonstrators. It's just normal now to compare Trump to Hitler. Years past, it was considered kind of forbidden to compare anybody to the Nazis and Hitler. What happened in the 20th century with the Holocaust, World War II and the Holocaust, was so out of the norm and at such a gigantic scale of, 12 million people killed in death camps, 6 million of them being Jews, which is a small minority to begin with. The Jewish global population still hasn't caught up to, or maybe just barely caught up to our numbers before the Holocaust. I mean, that's how devastating the Holocaust was at a civilizational level. Obviously, millions and millions, scores of millions of soldiers and civilians were killed across Europe and Russia, in Asia. It was just so exceptional and horrible to think about World War II and the Holocaust and the ideology of the Nazi Party and the Japanese. It just kind of boggles the mind. But now you have Tim Walz comparing people in Minneapolis to Anne Frank, and the New York Times, routinely publishes essays and thought pieces using Nazis, Hitler language for Republicans. It's just so obviously hyperbolic and crazy, but it's pernicious. It's really pernicious from the Jewish perspective, because if every time you see something you don't like with a person in a uniform or some use of state power you don't like, if every time you compare that to the Nazis, well, then Nazism ceases to exist. It's no longer exceptional. What happened in the 20th century, it's just a slur. It's just, it's like the far left accuses everybody of being racist if they make an observation that they don't like, or transphobic or something like that. It's always, and I know the right does the same thing. I'm just less familiar with that culture, but the right does it too. But the Nazis should have a special place in history. It should be beyond the Holocaust, particularly, should be beyond comparison. The death camps, the millions and millions, the logistics it required, and the dedication by so many millions of European people to create death camps and to make them work from, Belgium and Paris all the way to Russia, to the border of Russia, is unfathomable. Killing machine. They turned the continent into a killing machine. To compare that to an ICE agent enforcing popularly elected immigration policy is really denies the potency and the singularity of the Holocaust. And it also undercuts the idea for why we have the state of Israel, right? Israel did not arise because of the Holocaust. Israel arose before the Holocaust, but it was certainly strengthened its claim for global recognition of sovereignty because of the Holocaust. Right? That's a little bit of a nuance, but it's important to note. It's not like all of a sudden in 1948, a couple million Jews showed up in Israel. They had been laying the groundwork. Nobody wanted the Holocaust from the Jewish perspective. They had been laying the groundwork anyways. But if everybody's a Nazi that you don't like, if everything is a Holocaust, if every child is Anne Frank, then the Holocaust is no longer special, and it robs some of the necessary global validation of the whole argument for validating Jewish sovereignty in the first place. It's really dangerous. Does it matter? No. Israel has a very powerful military. Tim Walz can talk all he wants about Anne Frank. The real people who understand the dynamics of Nazism have nuclear weapons, and they're armed to the teeth, and they'll fight for their rights. And I'm proud of them for doing that. But it's problematic to me as a former Democrat and just as an American to see that this is the kind of locution used by the opposition party in this country. We deserve far better than what they're able to give. All right. Thank you so much for listening. I hope if you're interested in the Adam Lewis Klein event, you probably know how to contact me. I should also note that I created a Thatcher Report WhatsApp group. I always create things that are unnecessary. More podcasts, more Substacks, more WhatsApp groups. We're full, but nevertheless, there's another one. So if you're interested, contact me. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.